This adventure into Greece for me, I'll tell you a little story about. And it was Nikki, who I've known for some time, asking me if I'd be willing and interested to come down and speak for a while. And I said, do you remember who you called? And she went, yes. And I went, you're asking me if I'm willing to speak? Which is a ludicrous question. Give me an audience? Of course I'm going to speak. When and where? So what I didn't know is what to call myself. So she said, what do you want to call yourself in your thing? And I said, I trust you implicitly. So she came up with this title, Change Artist, which I actually like. I'm going to keep and steal. And see, this is the idea. You have to patent those ideas because now she's getting no credit and no money for it. I'm just going to take it. You know? So had she patented it, you know? But sometimes I have to come up with a name because I'm doing this work around the world for different places, different countries, different clients. And I'll call myself sometimes an applied mythologist. Sometimes I'll talk about myself as an applied cognitive scientist. So pretty much whoever strikes me in the morning that day. Because I don't know what I do. I don't know what I do until I do it. I don't know what I'm going to be saying to you in the next 12 minutes until I say it to a large extent. I have some ideas. But my idea is fundamentally that the world is emergent. You see, I think that there's a lot of interesting things going on in terms of the world at large. And we can look at the stories that are being told and how those stories capture us. Sometimes they capture us and they capture our fascination. They direct us forward and they allow us to do things we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Unfortunately, sometimes our stories capture us and keep us contained and stuck where we are. And I think there's a couple of stories I want to talk about today, one of them being the story of education, which I think is remarkably off track. You see, one of the things that I have been looking at is this question that recently came up. It's a cosmological question. There's this universe that we exist in, and this universe we exist in seems to be made up of 95% non-stuff. 70% is dark energy, causing the universe to want to accelerate its expansion. 25% is dark matter, causing the universe to want to contract and resist expansion. Only 5% is the stuff we see. See, this is like looking at a mountain in the middle of winter that's snow-covered and thinking the snow is the mountain. You get it? Well, that's what we've done with education. We think that one small part of our brain, about 5%, only on one side, by the way, is the brain and how we think and what we think. See, what you think isn't what you think. It's only that very small part of what it is that you think that you can acknowledge and recognize as thinking. All the rest of it, the other 95%, it's out of your awareness. So therefore, we set up schools and we teach our children to only attend to 5% of their brains. The left cortical hemisphere, if you want to be scientifically correct about it. The part that contains and uses language. And we become enamored with our ideas. We're overwhelmed with our cleverness. So let's talk about these stories again. Let me go to a different story. See, there's this story right now that's going on here about all kinds of things, depending on who you talk to. Hopelessness, helplessness, anxiety. There's a story that I see when I look at it that goes, there's a promise that was made, 50 years ago, about people who are now 50, 60, 70, 80 themselves, who were promised a certain level of expectation of comfort and ease in their life at this point. And they didn't know, they weren't being told clearly and explicitly that to get there, they'd have to ransom their children's future. But now they're being asked whether or not they want the future that they had come to expect for themselves, or to create the possibility of a future for their children. Because given the current structure, both are not possible. That's a story, you get it? And it either traps you or it frees you, depending on how you look at it. Let's talk about a different story. There's a place, from my point of view, not too far away, given where I come from, called Israel. And it's the center of this thing we call the Middle East. And in the Middle East, there's all kinds of conflict going on, right? And the conflict is who's got the right story, fundamentally. Well, what's interesting is when you look at it from the point of view I have, same story. It's not an argument about who's got the right story. It's got an argument about who gets to hold the book with the story in it. They change that, begin to recognize it's just one story, and it's only a question of nomenclature, what do you call the lead character, then to a great extent, there's a possibility that it opens. I'm from the United States. We've got a whole story going on there. And it's a story of profound moral, intellectual, ethical conflict. It's a story between the cheers and the slogans and the hurrahs we give to this concept called democracy, and yet how we act in the world imperialistically. They don't go together. So we wind up as a country that has a profound philosophical divide that's built into it. So we've got to make some decisions, and it looks like we're on the cusp of those decisions. You see, one of the things that I will offer you is I am a change agent. And the first rule of change is that no matter how good your preparation or predictions are, you're going to be wrong. Because you can't know what's going to happen in the next minute. You don't know what I'm going to say next. How can you possibly lay out 5-year plans, 50-year plans, 500-year plans? How can you do this? It's incomprehensible to me. It's incomprehensible the amount of time that's wasted in the organizations I work with doing annual budgets, which then get justified and argued about for the rest of the year, whether they're met or not, as opposed to just doing what comes up. You see, we have the capacity to change the way we think about how we think, to begin to add in the other 95%. So if I were going to say the 75% that we look at, that's dark energy, maybe it comes up to my solar plexus, right? And then we add 25% in for the dark matter, and that comes up to my eyes. And the 5% we think is what we think is just up here. That's it. But all this other stuff's going on. See, there's so much. I wish I had 2 hours with you so I could talk about all the wonderful things I heard today and listened to and the ideas that people were bringing up, but I don't. I've got a few minutes left. So instead, I'll point out just one group that caught my attention and fascinated me, in addition to all the other things that fascinate me. And it was these young dancers and singers who came up here and did their thing. I have to imagine, number one, that to some extent, at the beginning of that, there was an emergent process. They got together and they said, what can we do? What might be interesting? How can we express some ideas? And what were their tools? Their tools were their voice and their bodies. Well, that's not controlled in this linguistic 5% of the brain. That's controlled in another part of the brain that we hardly educate. But then the other thing they did is they coordinated it. And I don't know if any of you were as fascinated by it as I was, but what fascinated me was the ability for them to synchronize their movements. First, to the music, of course, as individuals, but then also to one another. And how did they do that? You see, we're uniquely built to do this. We're uniquely built to notice for what I call signals in the system. It's that information that's below the surface that hardly anybody notices. There's a book out there that became a bestseller called The Black Swan by a guy named Nassim Taleb. And he says that the black swan is the unpredictable event. I say he's full of it. It wasn't unpredictable. It was just unprecedented. And those are two different things. You see, there was a possibility that when those guys went over to Australia where there are black swans, and they walked on the beach and they saw that leaf, that feather, that had the right color and the right shape and form to suggest there were black swans, well, somebody right then and there could have predicted it. But to make that leap from the unprecedented to the possible is extraordinary. It takes an extraordinary individual who's so self-contained and so self-aware, so trusting of their intuition, that they're willing to give up what they've learned. You see, all of you, I believe, have brilliant brains and bad educations. Your education taught you to think that ideas are important. Taught you to think that thinking is about what you can acknowledge and recognize in your brain, and to distrust everything else. I go into schools and I talk to schools on occasion, and I talk to young children. I love working with the little kids. So I go and I talk to kindergartners, and I say, got a question for you guys. Do any of you know what a gorilla is? Do you know what happens when you ask a kindergarten, do you know what a gorilla is? The entire class goes, ooh, 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 ooh. And so I go, okay, what's a gorilla? Little kid goes, it's a big hairy monkey. I go, that's good. Then I go, does anybody know where they live? Ooh, ooh, ooh. I go, don't do gorilla, I just want to know where it lives. And they go, in the jungle. Excellent, in the jungle. Does anyone know the gestation period of a gorilla? 30 kindergartners go, ooh, 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 ooh. Have no idea what I just asked. But they're going to answer anyway. I then move on, and I go to the first grade class in that school, and I say, does anybody know what a gorilla is? I get 3 kids in the room, they go. And I think, what the hell happened? What did we do to them? I'm going back to kindergarten, because that's where all the intelligence is. It gets worse. Go to 5th grade. Go, do you know what a girl is? There's one girl. She's in the back corner. She goes. We uneducate our children. We make them afraid to answer questions. We make them afraid to take risks. We tell them that what's important and what they're going to get graded for is their ability to regurgitate what someone else thought. You get that? We reward the ability to vomit somebody else's information. And we leave out creativity. You see, in the United States, again, we have this massive effort going on to make sure we bring up our math and science scores, which means, of course, we have no time for music and art. We've got no time to teach dance, because who needs that? Who needs to know they have a body? Well, I'm a cognitive scientist, one of my many titles. And I've studied the brain. And I know there's more to it than a left cortical hemisphere. There must be a right cortical hemisphere, too, that's in your head. That one's kind of important, does some other stuff. But then if you go a little deeper, lots of fascination now. You can read books by guys like Daniel Goleman talking about emotional intelligence and how important it is. How important it is, by the way, in offices and businesses to be able to recognize what's going on and relate to people and capture the movement, the intensity, the feeling of what's going on between individuals. And then if you go even further back, way back at the back of the brain, there's this part of it called the cerebellum. And the cerebellum was thought to be inconsequential. You could leave it out, wouldn't make a big deal. Except that it did this little thing called controlling movement. Other than that, it was uninteresting to the neuroscientists for 50-odd years. But now we're beginning to understand something absolutely profound. It's also the seat of what's called the implicit self. The way you know who you are yourself. You see, I can do something, I can get away with it here. I'm in Athens, I'm going to take advantage of it. Anywhere else in the world, I get accused of being an ivory tower academic intellectual. But here I can say 2 words which I'm not allowed to say outside of Greece. The first thing is we can agree on a fundamental ontology, a way of being, that I exist. So can we agree fundamentally that I'm here? Yes. Right? So we can put aside the fantastic metaphysics of the possibility of me not being here and just being a projection of your consciousness, but we're not going to do that. The second thing is this other word called epistemology. And epistemology is, how do you know that I'm here? How do you know that I'm here? Am I just an idea, a conception in your mind? Because that's what recent philosophy, if you listen to it, would try to tell you, is that I'm just a phenomenological entity that doesn't really exist other than as a subjective, symbolic representation in your mind. And I say, again, they're full of it. You know I'm here. You're waiting for me to get done so you can get on to dinner. Who are you kidding? Of course I'm here. And what's going on is that you know I'm here because we're interacting. You see, we've been given this incredible gift from the gods. Not our soul, our body. Our body allows us to be in the world and to embody experience, to actually have experiences, not just by ourselves, but with others. We can sync up and we can interact with others in such a way that allow us to do things that are incapable, impossible, beyond the scope of any given individual, but not nearly out of the reach of many. And this is a gift that's of profound consequence, especially right now in times like this. The ability to notice others and to use this incredible tool we have, and to be able to access the parts of our brain that have been uneducated. We need to teach our kids to dance. There's a famous educator who's written a number of books by the name of, it doesn't matter, I'm not even going to tell you his name. But the point is that he asked his daughter, when she was 5 years old, who had been homeschooled up until that point, none of this nursery school stuff, we think it's time for you to go to school to have a different experience. Is that okay with you? She went, of course, Daddy, I want to go to school. As long as they teach the important stuff. So, of course, being an educator, he said to her, "What's the important stuff?" She said, "As long as we get to sing and dance. Daddy, as long as we get to sing and dance." All that intelligence in the kindergarten. See what I said? And the arts and the music trains our brains to do things that are so critical to us, and that if we leave out, are going to leave us absolutely decrepit in a very critical way. See, here's the thing. If you do not take control of the stories that you're living, then you'll be living someone else's story. The first and most important thing that you can do here in Greece, that we can do at home in the United States, is to reshape the story that we're all living. But in order to do that, we first have to shape the story that we live ourselves. Until you know who you are, you can't know what this country is capable of. You can't know what's possible for the world. And you'll sacrifice the future of your children and your children's children simply because you didn't know what the story says. Last thing I'll offer you is you can't know what that story is till it shows up. So get out of your heads and into the world and take joy and wonder in the fact that you have a body to do it with. Thank you. Thank you.